All right, new video today. I'm pretty excited about this. A lot of new things. First off, I'm in a new space. Finally finished the home office. Really excited to be able to do a little bit more content in here, and obviously hybrid work and the Mustang stuff. It's going to be fun to work in this environment because I finally have an office I'm pretty proud of. So that's exciting. But in addition to that, I'm working with Baer. Baer brakes. They've been around forever. Everyone knows about Baer brakes. They're coming out with an Eradispeed rotor for the Dark Horse Mustang and obviously EcoBoost Performance Pack and GT Performance Package cars as well. It's a two-piece replacement, Eradispeed, so you have the cross-drilled and slotted rotors, but they're also offering a track-oriented option for slotted only. It's pretty common knowledge that if you are buying a track-oriented rotor, it's relatively frowned upon to have a dedicated track rotor that's cross-drilled, and that's frankly, you put a hole through the rotor, it offers an opportunity for cracks and stress cracks and things like that to work their way through the rotor. In talking with Baer, they shared that they were very confident that the cross-drilled and slotted rotor would be a good solution for someone who wanted the everyday, all-around, all-purpose rotor solution. Obviously they look pretty cool too, but personally I like the slotted only look anyways. I think the cross drill is kind of just crowded and it takes away from the wheel and everything else going on from an aesthetic standpoint, but also functionally slotted is a lot better for track oriented use. As we all know, since 2019 the GT350 came with smooth rotors, 2020 the GT500 came with smooth rotors, and then Mach 1, Handling Pack, and now Dark Horse, all smooth now. And honestly, smooth's probably best, simply for pad wear and everything else, but I like the slotted look. They say that it helps dissipate the gases from the brakes in super high performance and super high heat situations like you see on track. So today's video is a very quick overview of the install. I'm going to tell you how to bed the brakes. I did reuse the stock pads for this application. I do plan to switch that up in the future, so stay tuned for that. But for now, this testing is all with stock pads before and after. And once bedded, we did some 60 to 0 testing, which was pretty cool to see the changes there, despite the lack of a pad change. Spoiler alert, the Baers actually did better 60 to 0 testing, which I did not expect, considering it is the same exact pad. And then the best part of the video, we went out to Carolina Motorsports Park and took these brakes and put them through the paces in a very high heat, high brake environment. What everyone told me, I came from the firm down in Florida, did a lot of racing there back when I was at Stida, and took my GT350 out there on the firm. It's a very, very brake intensive course. So coming from there and then everyone telling me, oh, CMP is very brake intensive too. It is. Not quite as bad as the firm. There is some runoff there where I got up to about 122 miles an hour twice at the top of fourth gear to get some air moving through there and cool the brakes down for the next turn. So it's a lot of fun. Really excited to talk to you more about that. But without further ado, I'm going to start off with the installation. The Baer brakes were relatively easy to install. If you have installed rotors and pads on a car before, it's relatively straightforward. The difference with the Dark Horse is that the rear brakes, you do have that extra parking brake caliper now to worry about, but that was super easy to take care of. 2 quick bolts and the parking caliper came right off. And then same thing with the regular Brembo caliper in the rear. And then for the front, same deal. Regular rotor replacement. I have put these brakes through some serious heat cycles already, so I was expecting to have to work a little bit to get the rotors off of the car, and I'm happy to say out of all 4, only 1 required a hammer, and that was only maybe 2 or 3 taps, and it came right off. So all in all, relatively straightforward. One thing I do want to point out though, is that these new 2024 Mustangs are very smart. And by that, I mean they have sensors and computers for absolutely everything. Hence the reason we can't tune these things yet. Why do I say that? Because in the process of swapping these rotors out, I actually tripped some sort of code for the ABS module. Quick edit here, I learned that there is a brake maintenance mode for the car, so I'm gonna show you a quick step-by-step process on how to do that. I did not do it in brake maintenance mode, and it made my dash light up like a Christmas tree, so learn from me, follow the steps, and you'll be able to do it at home. All right, first thing you wanna do is turn the ignition on. Then you press the brake pedal and release the parking brake. Just leave the car in gear. Then I press and hold the accelerator pedal and push the parking brake down. And while continuing to hold the brake pedal and the parking brake, turn the ignition off. Then turn the ignition back on. And you'll hear the brake system cycle. And then what it is the parking brake moving further in, moving that piston all the way in. You'll also see an error warning next to the brake while it's blinking, and you'll get the error message as well. And at this point, now that you're in brake maintenance mode, you're ready to do the work on the car. Now that you've done the work to the car, you're ready to get it out of brake maintenance mode. First, you turn the ignition on. Once the ignition's on, you'll still see the error warning come up that it's in brake maintenance mode. Push the accelerator to the floor, pull up on the parking brake, press the brake pedal for at least 1 second, and put it back up, all while holding the gas pedal and the parking brake. Turn the ignition off. Turn the ignition back on. And you'll hear everything cycle, and you're good to go. Some really great features and benefits with the Baer rotors. They are the same, essentially, Eradispeed rotors that have been around for the Mustang from Baer since 2015. They have the cross drilled and slotted. That's kind of their standard, their main Eradispeed Plus rotor. And then they have this slotted only option for people like me who really like to heat up the crap out of their brakes. But overall, I'm very impressed with the fit and finish of the product. I do like the laser etching on the black aluminum hat, you know, the Baer logo and the Eradispeed. Just a friendly reminder that it's a pretty cool household name when it comes to brakes, and a pretty cool, just nice little touch to know that you've got a special product on your car. And you know it's gonna last the test of time and heat when it comes to motorsports activities. With all that said, the installation itself was pretty darn easy. Took me all of maybe 2 hours doing it on jack stands in the driveway as the sun was going down. Just take your time, work your way through it, make sure you cross all your T's, dot all your I's, as they say, and be relatively easy to do. I didn't mess with the pads, so keep that in mind. This is stock pads before and after. When it comes to bedding, I did follow the Hawk Performance brake pad bedding procedure. This is something I'm relatively familiar with since I've run their pads quite a bit on the GT350 and my old 2018 GT. But being stock pads from Ford, I knew that I could do the regular street bedding procedure and not have an issue. The reason why I bedded these brakes, even though I reused the same pads, at the end of the day, the brake pad and the rotor need to basically marry each other, right? There's things from the brake pad that transfer onto the rotor in high heat situations, so everything works cohesively when the pads hit the rotor to stop the car. So that's why I went ahead and bedded the brakes. I didn't do anything crazy in terms of taking sandpaper to the brakes or to the brake pads or anything like that. I just threw everything back together, went out and bedded the brakes. I would have a better video for you on this, but I ended up doing it after dark, but it was relatively easy. Hawk's procedure is very simple. So essentially 6 to 10 stops, 30 to 35 mile an hour, down to about 5 miles an hour. You do not want to come to a complete stop at all when you are bedding the brakes. That could basically cause a burn-in spot, if you think about it, a burn-in spot with hot brake pads and hot rotors. When you're transferring that film, you want a nice clean, round, clean finish all the way around the rotor on both sides, all 4 corners. And then after you've done those 6 to 10 stops, you can move on to 2 to 3 hard stops from 40 to 45 miles per hour. Same deal, don't come to a complete stop, down to about 5 miles an hour and get back on it again. Admittedly, I did some harder stops as well. I did a couple 60 to 70 stops because I wanted to make sure I really got on these brakes to clean off any residue or anything that was left over of the factory rotors. I probably overdid it. I tend to do that on some things, but better to be safe than sorry. And I knew that I was going to go out and use these in a track situation in relatively short order, so I wanted to do some pretty quick stops as well. Don't drag the brakes. Once you're down to 5 miles an hour, you go back up. Then after that, I did a quick cool down, just driving around, really didn't get on the brakes at all for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, working my way back to the house, and then I parked the car overnight. Again, they say you really only need 15 minutes. But it's one of those things I'd like, especially when it comes to motorsports and you want the absolute optimum performance out of your brakes. I just let the car sit overnight. And that's a relatively good rule of thumb, whether you're doing street pads, track pads, or anything in between. So I let the car sit overnight. I did not engage the emergency brake, so I made sure that stayed off when I turned the car off, and put the car in gear, let it sit, completely cool down, and I was good to go the next day. So the brake testing, I'm really excited about this, and that's because honestly the results were a little bit surprising. Typically when it comes to stopping distance, the rotor itself and the weight of the rotor being a little bit lighter or heavier isn't going to make an immense amount of difference when it comes to 60 to 0 testing. But I was relatively surprised. The main benefit of these Eradispeed Plus rotors is a little bit lighter, right? You're gonna have less rotating mass, which is always good for freeing up power, a little bit better on the steering response, you know, all the benefits that come with rotating inertia and getting that power to the ground, right? In addition to that, heat dissipation, right? So you have the slotted rotors, and then you have some pretty aggressive vanes in between the braking surfaces on the rotors that are gonna allow basically the brakes, the rotors themselves, to work as a powerful pump to pump all that hot air out of the wheel well area when the car is at speed, to keep cool air coming in from those brake ducts that Ford has conveniently put on these dark horses and the GT performance packs, and essentially get the most out of your braking system. And we all know that the factory braking system on the EcoBoost Performance Pack, GT Performance Pack, and Dark Horse Handling Pack, and regular Dark Horse, is impeccable. I've spoken about that multiple times from the factory. I'm really, really, really impressed with the braking performance out of the box on these cars. So Ford really did their homework on these, and it's tough to improve upon that, to be honest. Okay, so for the brake testing procedure, what I did was 3 stops. I did 3 stops, and I pulled the average from those 3 stops, and the data points I pulled was stopping distance, front temperature at the center of the rotor on the braking surface, and rear temperature on the center of the rotor on the braking surface. So, and I pulled averages across the board and compared before and after. Tried to make this as relatively even as possible. There was a day between testing. Obviously, I had to install the rotors that evening. All in all, I would say that it's a relatively straightforward test with minimal margin for error. So let's get into the data. Stop 1 for stock was 93 feet for the stop, incredible. Front temperature was 140, rear temperature was 108. Stop 2 was 96 feet, 150 for the front temperature, and 112 for the rear temperature. And stop 3 was 95 feet. Stock front temperature was 166 and rear temp 136. This came out to an average of 94.67 feet across the 3 stops. Front temperature an average of 152, and the rear temperature an average of 118.67. In terms of the stock braking performance, like I said, it's already incredible. You factor in the incredibly sticky Trofeo RS tires from Pirelli, and this is one heck of a package to have right out of the box. But I was curious to see how the Baer brakes did. Obviously, temperature management is something that's a big benefit of getting brakes like this between the slotted performance as well as the very aggressive vanes that the Baer brakes feature to, again, evacuate that heat as quickly as possible when the car is moving at speed and keep temperatures down. I was pleasantly surprised on the Baer brakes results when it came to 60 to 0 testing. Stop 1 was a whopping 84 feet. I had to go back and look at the video again to make sure I was stopping in the correct place, but it was very, very impressive. 84 feet. Front temp was 139, so about the same. Rear temp 102, a little bit cooler. But again, watch that curve as the temperatures get warmer throughout the course of the 3 stops, and you'll see the curve is favorable towards the Baer brakes. Stop 2 is 90 feet, again, a little bit shorter than stock. 148 for the front temperature, 107 for the rear temperature. And then stop 3, 87 feet, again, incredible. 163 for the front temp and 128 for the rear temp. Average braking distance was 87 feet. The average front temperature was 150 and the average rear temperature was 112 degrees. Something to keep in mind was the average temperature increase between stock and the Baer over the course of 3 stops. This is my reference point, this is my data point for how the car is going to perform on track in comparison from stock to the Baer brakes. If the rate of increase of temperature across these 3 stops is better or less for the Baer brakes, then you can infer that on a track situation, stock versus Baer, you're going to have better performance out of the brakes in terms of heat management, given the lesser curve on the Baer brakes. So stock average temperature increase across the 3 stops for the front was 8.9%. And for the rear, 12.57%. For the Baer brakes, 8.3% up front, which, you know, we're only talking about 3 stops, but to see a 0.6% difference between the 2 is pretty impressive. And then 12.26% increase in the rear. All in all, very, very surprising results, honestly. I was expecting the temperature management to be better, but I was not expecting the distance, the braking distance to be better. If you guys have any comments about this testing, where I could have potentially had some margin for error in this, please let me know in the comments below. I'm not an engineer by any means. I'm just someone who really likes data and really likes testing. So yeah, comment below. I'm curious about your thoughts. In terms of the weights, this was interesting as well. So I don't have a GT or an EcoBoost performance package. So I reached out to Cash over at Shelby American, and he thankfully had a bunch of them laying around from the Shelbys that they're pumping out over there. If you haven't seen the Super Snake, be sure to check it out because it's super, super cool. The front weight on the factory GT and EcoBoost performance package brakes is 37 pounds. That's for the rotor itself. And the rear, 21 pounds. Keep in mind, the rear between GT, EcoBoost, and Dark Horse is all the same one piece, but the Dark Horse has a 2-piece rotor factory up front. And that 2-piece rotor is 31.8 pounds. Pretty impressive they were able to cut out literally 5.2 pounds out of the front rotor. That's quite a bit of material, especially considering the Baers come in at 34 pounds. So the front Baer is a little bit heavier than the factory 2-piece rotor on the Dark Horse. My comments on this, I was kind of bummed to see this a little bit, but at the end of the day, I would take on a little bit more weight up front to have the reliability and track performance that I'm gonna want over the long haul. Less material, there's a happy medium between material and heat management, right? If there's not enough material in the rotor, then it's not gonna handle the heat as well as something that's gonna have a little bit more material. Not to say the factory brakes aren't good. They were amazing when I had them at the Ford Performance Racing School, testing out their Dark Horses. They've been amazing in autocross and everything else. But I'm gonna feel a little bit better knowing that I'm gonna have a tried and true Baer rotor, that these things are designed to take on motorsports applications. And after my experience at Charlotte Motorsports Park and it only being an hour away, I'm definitely going back and using these brakes even harder. Rears, happy to report, 21 pounds stock across the board for S650 on the performance pack deal. And the Baer brakes come in at 18 pounds. So you get a 3-pound savings in the rear of rotating mass, which is always great because that's where you're putting the power down. Not to say you're not going to be spinning the wheels up front, and there's a little bit of negative to come from the additional weight over the front of the car, especially from a balance standpoint. But in terms of getting power down on the straights, you know, a little bit more working for you with that 3-pound reduction in the rear. So all in all, very, very impressed with the results from the 60-0 testing. Better than I anticipated, better than I hypothesized. So I'm excited to share my thoughts at Carolina Motorsports Park. All right, not only was it my first time out in my dark horse on the road course, but also my first time at Carolina Motorsports Park. It was a lot. There was a lot of new going on. I've done a ton of autocross in my car already. I've had some fun on the back roads. I've had some fun in empty parking lots and cul-de-sacs and things. I was confident in the car, and I felt right at home with the seated suspension on it after experiencing that in my GT350. But all in all, going to a brand new track and running the car quick enough to get feedback on these brakes was a little not nerve-wracking, but I was a little anxious going into it. I'm happy to report it was really good. Unfortunately, this part of the testing, I will put this disclaimer out there, this part of the testing was a little bit more subjective feedback than it was anything analytical or objective, I should say. I didn't have the means to be able to test both stock and Baer brakes at the track and actually do a rotor swap and do this properly. So take that with what you will. But the main goal after talking with the guys at Baer was to determine that these brakes more or less performed like stock with the additional benefits that come with the heat management, right? So driving on the street, which I'm happy to report, felt like stock brakes altogether. There wasn't any pulsating in the brake pedal. There wasn't anything funky. Everything felt completely like stock. There wasn't any extra noise, nothing. Totally normal, which that was good. Plus the benefit of actually having better braking from 60-0, which was unexpected. So I did 3 sessions out there. One of the sessions got cut short because a couple cars may have traded some paint in my run group, but SCCA Track Night in America had put on an amazing event at Carolina Motorsports Park. I've always loved the SCCA crew, and this was my first time racing with the Track Night in America folks, and you can kind of put that in the category of like Track Night in America is a great gateway drug to like get involved in road course racing, so I knew it was a good entry point going to an event like that versus a time trial or something a little bit more serious at a track that I literally never raced at, right? So after chatting with the officials in the beginning, getting a feel for what run group I should be in, I ended up running in the advanced class or advanced group with a bunch of folks who have been racing there for a very long time. So I was definitely intimidated and watching my mirrors closely on my first runs out. Did quite a bit of point buys while I got my sea legs on course, but by the third session, I felt pretty good in how I performed, both in my car on course, how the brakes performed everything else. So without further ado, check out my fastest lap. Ended up being a 1:49.7. Pretty proud of that because I was aiming for a 1:50. I was going to be happy leaving that day with a 1:50. So check it out. In terms of how the car performed out on track, I'm blown away. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Mustang guy and I love Mustangs and all that stuff. I've been driving Mustangs as long as I've been able to drive. I've done a lot of stupid things of them, and this is the best driving Mustang that I have ever felt out on course. I've had time in GT500s, I've had time in Mach 1s, I've had time in my 350, I've had time in 350Rs, and admittedly the GT350 does have a little bit more character, I should say. But in terms of ease of drivability and how the car handles the course, how the car handles inputs, how easy it is to just hop in this car and go 8 or 9 tenths, even 10 tenths at times, was impeccable. The Ford and Ford Performance team did an amazing job on the body control and the MagneRide and the braking, the flat foot shifting. I mean, I used every feature that car came with out on track, and it helped me focus more on things like car placement, relaxing myself behind the wheel, shift points, braking points, all of the other important things that come with driving a car at the limit out on track. But I didn't have to take away brain power, because there's so many things going on when you're at speed, right? Didn't have to take away brain power to heel toe downshift and all that sort of stuff. I'm okay at heel toe downshifting. Does the car do it for you? Yeah, I'm sure some of the purists out there are going to go, well, you might as well have had an automatic out there, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I guess you're right. The GT350 was a little bit more difficult to drive in that regard at the limit. But I gotta say, for someone who has a somewhat decent amount of track experience, I'm no expert or pro by any means, this car was very easy to drive. And it glided over the curbs. Even with the stiffer Steeda dual rate springs, the factory MagneRide calibration in this car is impeccable in comparison to anything I felt or seen with S550. So I'm very, very pleased with that. One of my favorite parts about being on track, before we hop into the brakes and how they performed, I have to say, was flat foot shifting. I was a little concerned. I started out in my first and second sessions kind of not really doing flat foot shifting except for on the straights. But as I tried to be as smooth as possible in my regular normal shifting, clutch, foot off the gas, working my way through the gears, I started to find that flat foot shifting was smoother on the car than my standard shifting, especially if I was going full bore. You're not out on the drag strip. You're not trying to absolutely bang gears and rip the shifter off. You're trying to keep it smooth because you don't want to upset the car, especially if you're doing other inputs at the same time or about to do another input. You don't want to upset the car, right? You want to have as much tire contact patch on all four corners as possible at all times. That's how you're going to have the most grip. So with that said, going from turn 8, which was a relatively decent turn, I had to brake pretty hard after being at about the top of 4th gear, which is a 120 to 122. Hard brakes in the turn 8, and then turn 9, they call that the kink. No, I'm sorry, turn 10 is the kink. But it's turn 9 is kind of a sweeping turn. If I found myself kind of easing off the gas and kind of getting back on it as I was getting my sea legs out on track. But by session 3, I was coming out of turn 8. By the time I hit turn 9, I'm at the top of 3rd gear, and I'm flat foot shifting going into turn 9, starting to give input on the steering wheel to get the car turned and hitting 4th gear all at the same time. And I'm happy to report there was no issues with traction. I felt completely confident with the car underneath me. And it was really, really cool to be able to not take my foot off of the floor with my right foot and have the car help me with that shift. Obviously, the shift was faster too. Then the MagneRide really shined on turn 10, which is what they call the kink. I'm pretty much at the top of 4th gear. Coming into 10, I coasted a little bit because I really didn't trust myself that much, trust my talent that much to keep on it too hard. So I coasted a little bit, get on the brakes, and the line kind of takes you right across the curbing there, which used to be a lot rougher from what I've told, but the curbing's still present. the MagneRide glided right over it. Very, very smooth, did not upset the car whatsoever, and I took it right on to turn 11. Again, really, really cool. As for the brakes and how they performed, I got these suckers up to temperature. The pictures I took, I think 720 some degrees up front, 530 something or 540 something in the rear. That was after cool down lap. That was after pulling into the pits, parking the car, getting out, turning off the cameras, getting out and measuring the temperature. So it's safe to say that those were probably up to 900 plus, maybe even 1,000 degrees. So the rotors were purple in some areas, blue, exactly what a hot rotor should look like and sound like with it pinging. But I'm happy to report there was impeccable performance out of the brakes. I'm in love with the tires. The Trofeo RSs are an amazing tire at the limit. Very confidence inspiring. They didn't fall off. My first session, I had a little too much pressure out there and I started to feel the front fall off, but it was a very linear fall off. You know, unlike the AO52s in an autocross situation where you kind of hit that limit and understeer, and the car just starts to plow like a dump truck. And I've experienced that quite a bit with the Yokohamas. So love the Trofeo RSs. I'm excited to try out hopefully some other tires in the future, but for now, I'm excited to get back out on those tires again. As for the brakes, subjectively, I'm very, very impressed, especially after feeling them at the Ford Performance Racing School with the Dark Horse Track Attack, and then coming out here to Carolina Motorsports Park and seeing them in action and feeling them in action. No brake fade, and I gave the car all I was confident enough to give it, which is probably 8 or 9 tenths at a 149.7. Realistically, a professional, someone who really knows that track, can probably get another 4 to 4-ish seconds out of it probably, because I know my lines weren't perfect. But for my experience level, being the first time out on track, I'm very happy with the times. I'm very happy with how the car performed. Very happy with the alignment I had ahead of time and how the car just felt overall. Very, very planted. If you have any comments on this, this was an absolute data dump of information on you in this video. I wanted to make sure to share this with you. Baer reached out to me to help them do some validation testing with these brakes to make sure they do what they market they say they do. And I'm happy to report they definitely do, and I'll be getting another set once I work through these rotors. So comment below and let me know your thoughts. What else do you want to see with the Dark Horse, with testing like this? I love testing. It's a lot of work, honestly, especially for one person, but I really enjoy sharing the knowledge with you guys. So if you want to come along for the ride, be sure to subscribe. And aside from that, we'll see you next time. It's going to be a good one.